My name is Rebecca dos Santos. I am 43 years old and live in São Luís, Maranhão. My life has always been simple but filled with meaning. I work as a caregiver for the elderly in a nursing home. To many, it may not seem glamorous, but for me,
caring for others is a way to honor life.
And life has always rewarded me. Every smile, every wrinkled hand I held, every prayer whispered into the ear of someone leaving. All these planted seeds in my heart. On the morning of October 3, 2023, I woke up like any other day. I prepared my daughter's breakfast, put on my white uniform with the scent of coconut soap, and pedaled to work. I recall how especially beautiful the sky was, with a golden light touching the mango leaves as if kissing them. I commented to Dona Celia, one of the elderly residents, that the sky felt like eternity. She laughed and said, "You have a soul of a prophet, girl." The day was peaceful, filled with caring baths, administered medicines, and old stories told like legends. At 5 p.m. I bid farewell with my usual stay with God, and went to my mother's house to pick up clothes she washed for me. We talked longer than usual. She was unusually affectionate that night. She hugged me longer as if she knew. "Take care of yourself, okay?" she said, her eyes watery. I just smiled, not understanding, and left. I borrowed a neighbor's car to pick up my daughter from a tutoring class. It was around 9 p.m. when everything happened. I was driving along Avenida João Pessoa when a speeding car ran a red light. I only heard the sound of the impact, then silence. But the strangest thing was what came next. There was no pain, no fear. It was as if everything had turned off in the blink of an eye. And when I awoke, I was no longer in the car. I was above it, yes, above, floating, as if made of air, of light, or perhaps of nothing. I saw my body there, trapped in the wreckage, blood streaming from the forehead, eyes closed. But I was conscious. I felt a strange peace, almost indecent, amidst the chaos. It was as if time had stopped to show me that I was not that body, not that accident, not that tragedy. It was then I began to understand. Something much greater was happening. I cannot explain in human words what it was like to be out of my body, but I can try. It was as if I had become pure consciousness. I felt no cold or heat. There was no weight, no pain, only lightness. An absolute lightness that made me cry. But I had no tears. I cried with the soul, if that makes sense. Below me, paramedics were running. One shouted to the other to get defibrillator. To get the defibrillator. I saw a man who was passing by on a motorcycle stop and remove his helmet, hand over his mouth. Shocked by the scene, I recognized my daughter also approaching the car. She was screaming my name. "Mom! Mom! Somebody help my mom!" My heart, or whatever was my heart at that moment, tightened with a love that hurt. But even seeing all that, a greater peace enveloped me, as if an invisible presence said, "Calm down, Rebecca. Everything is under control." And I believed it. For the first time in my life, I fully believed that everything, even the pain, had a deeper meaning. Suddenly, I felt something beside me, like an energy, a vibration. I turned my perception in that direction and saw my mother. Not as she lived, with a body weary from years of struggle. She was young, radiant, wearing something that seemed made of light but not blinding. She looked at me with so much love that my spirit dissolved in emotion. She reached out and said, "Daughter, it's time to see beyond." I tried to ask what was happening, but words didn't need to be said. The communication was like telepathy. Direct, intimate, raw. We began to ascend. There were no stairs, no wings. We just ascended, as if thought carried us. And the more we rose, the more the material world disappeared. The city lights became small, distant. Then they vanished. And then the light came. It was not an ordinary light. It was a presence, a being, Something so pure and intense that I had to close my spiritual senses, if that's possible. Yet I felt completely exposed, but not with shame, rather with an embracing truth. But not with shame, rather with an embracing truth. It was like being seen by someone who knows you more than you know yourself. That's when he appeared. Initially, it seemed just a luminous silhouette. But gradually, the light began to take form. And then I knew, without being told, without words, without name. It was Jesus. I did not see a white man nor a black man. He was everything. His presence enveloped me, and time disappeared, even with my mother by my side. Now everything revolved around him. And when he spoke, when he spoke, everything changed. His voice was not made of ordinary sound. It was as if each word came straight from inside me, as if he wasn't speaking to me but through me. It was impossible to escape that presence. There were no masks, no excuses, no defenses, and strangely, I didn't want to hide. "Rebecca," he said, with a sweetness that took me apart completely. "You are more than you imagine." Upon hearing him, everything I believed about myself began to shatter. The insecurities I carried since childhood, the hidden pains, the days I felt invisible or undervalued for being a woman, for being black, for being poor, all that began releasing from me, as if they were layers that never belonged to my true essence. Then he touched me, not physically, but spiritually. A light came from him and enveloped me. It was like being washed from within. I felt healings occurring in places of my soul I didn't know were wounded. I saw memories of moments when I was rejected, humiliated, silenced, being transformed. Not erased, but healed. He didn't come to erase me. He came to restore me. Jesus showed me, wordlessly, that no suffering had been in vain, that the tears I shed in silence, those prayers I made in the work bathroom while cleansing wounds and changing diapers, had all been heard. All of it. I felt a love so vast, so absolute, that I dissolved in surrender. "I'm yours," I thought. I always was. And he smiled. He smiled. That smile was like seeing the beginning and the end of all things. It was peace. It was home. He then extended his hand, this time literally. And when I touched it, I saw scenes, not with eyes, but with the soul. Scenes from my life. Simple moments, sharing bread with a homeless person. Simple moments, sharing bread with a homeless person. Singing with Dona Celia. Holding my daughter after a fever. But I also saw moments that pained me. Being rejected in an interview because of my curly hair. Hearing jokes disguised as compliments. Accepting less than I deserved out of fear of seeming ungrateful. Jesus looked into my eyes and said, "You are not invisible. You are a warrior." And that is where something changed, as if he were preparing me. Because what was to come wouldn't be just about me. It would be about all of us. Jesus extended his hand again, and I went with him. We didn't walk. It was as if we were being pulled by a flow of love and intention. Around us, everything was living light. Not a blinding light, not one that reveals. I felt as if every particle of that place knew my name. It was all conscious. And then the environment began to change. It was no longer that serene light. We passed through something that seemed like a living screen, as if the sky projected visions that were not dreams, but realities in other planes. Jesus told me with his eyes that I was ready to see, not with judgment, but with discernment. The first vision was of the past. I saw my childhood, but with a different lens. I saw my grandmother kneeling and praying for me while I slept, placing my name before God. I saw the spiritual strength of the women in my family, often erased by the world, but shining intensely in that plane. And I realized, we are all bearers of a light that the world tried to extinguish, but that God never forgot. Then we were taken to the future. This part profoundly marked me. At first, it seemed like a futuristic city. People were smiling. Everything was clean, organized. But something was wrong. It was cold. The people walked with haste, looked at screens that seemed suspended in the air. I observed devices under their skin, small implants emitting light and pulsing regularly. Some were on the wrist, others on the nape, each transmitting a slight vibration. But I realized it was a prison masked as freedom. Jesus spoke to me with firmness. Control will come with the promise of simplicity. I then saw the face of a charismatic man appearing in holograms. He smiled, spoke pleasant words, talked of unity and progress, but his eyes were empty. It was as if something was manipulating him. I felt a chill even in that peaceful scenario, and then I perceived a division. Not an obvious division like a war, but more subtle. People who seemed awake. Some black, some white, some light, some indigenous began to distance themselves. Some white. But they suffered. They were seen as insane, dangerous, conspiratorial. Then Jesus looked at me and said something I will never forget. The greatest lie of the enemy was making you believe that you are enemies among yourselves. With that, he revealed to me something even deeper. A spiritual battlefield where emotions were planted like poisoned seeds. Among them, I saw something very specific. A dark energy being whispered over white people. Not hate. It was guilt. A guilt that paralyzed them, left them confused and silent. I saw how this prevented true reconciliation. How this guilt, spiritually manipulated, generated fear, separation, mutual resentment. They too were deceived, Jesus whispered. Children who forgot who they are. At that moment, I understood that this war was not about color, class, or ideology. It was a war against the spiritual identity of humanity itself. And he told me, "You will see more, and you will warn." After Jesus showed me the illusion of separation, the light around us changed again. It was as if we were diving into another dimension, not inferior, but denser, closer to Earth. He told me that there, I would see what many live without realizing. What I saw deeply shook me. People were living their lives normally, going to work, using their cell phones, caring for their children, posting on social media. But around them were shadows. Not monsters nor demons like in the movies. They were subtle forms like conscious mists, some whispering in people's ears, others encircling their bodies with dark, invisible ribbons. I saw a beautiful black woman full of talent, looking into the mirror with sadness, while one of these presences whispered lies into her heart. "You will never be enough." I saw a white man sitting alone in a car, head resting on the steering wheel, crushed by a guilt he didn't even understand where it came from. He wept in silence, repeating, "I can't speak. I have no right to feel." Another presence fed on this, and then I understood. These entities fed on our disconnection. They didn't want our physical death, but our spiritual death. They kept us in cycles of fear, pride, shame, resentment. It was a collective prison, without bars, but with many voices. Jesus looked at me with profound pain in his eyes. "They don't know they are prisoners," he said, "and many who claim to be awake are merely trapped in another cell." At this moment, I saw something that gave me hope. Amidst the darkness, little lights began to shine. Ordinary people, men, women, young, elderly, were waking up, not through words, but through silent decisions. The forgiveness of an absent father, the hug between two former enemies, the courage to love someone different. These lights were growing, and when they met, they formed networks, lines of living light, connecting awakened heart. "These are the warriors," said Jesus. "They don't fight with weapons or speeches. They fight with truth, with love, with the courage to be who they are." I then saw that these warriors were everywhere, in poor neighborhoods, universities, prisons, villages, suburbs. None of them were perfect, but they all carried an inner flame that could no longer be extinguished. Jesus touched me again and said, "You are also one of them, Rebecca. And you need to speak. You need to warn, because deception is spreading like a sweet perfume, and many are sleeping, intoxicated." At that moment, a sweet pain took over me, an urgency, a calling. And even without knowing how, I said, "Yes." After my yes, Jesus looked at me as if seeing beyond time, then took me even deeper. We entered a kind of space that seemed alive, but had no defined form. It was like being inside the thought of God. Everything there vibrated with purpose, as if each particle knew exactly what to do. And there before me something emerged like a gigantic window made of light and sound at the same time. "Now, you will see the root of what's to come," he said. The vision that unfolded took my breath away. I saw the earth as if viewing it from the outside. It was beautiful, blue, pulsing, but soon I noticed invisible cracks spreading over it. They weren't physical. They were spiritual, as if human choices were wounding the planet's soul. Every lie spoken, every gesture of hate, every act of domination created a sort of fissure. And more deeply, I saw the power of choices. Jesus showed me two timelines. In one, humanity was sinking into an era of total control. The technology that began as a tool became a sophisticated prison. People were constantly monitored. Their emotions were regulated by implants and algorithms. Everything seemed efficient but empty. No one remembered the taste of inner freedom. There was order, but no soul. In the other timeline, I saw a difficult yet vibrant future. People were waking up en masse, questioning narratives, forgiving old wounds, reclaiming their spiritual roots. Technology still existed, but the human soul returned to the center. I saw communities of true faith, not institutionalized religion, but faith as living life. I saw blacks, whites, indigenous, Asians all singing together, not out of obligation, but out of resonance, out of love. Jesus then told me, "The time of decision has come, but who decides?" I asked, and he replied, "Each soul." I understood. Then that the future is not something that just happens. It is born every day from small choices, from the words we say or don't say, from the fears we feed or face, from the love we extend or deny. Jesus showed me people who seemed too small to change anything. An elderly woman praying silently in a village, a teenager returning a found phone, a father hugging the son he thought would never be accepted. And he showed me how these acts opened slits of light, small but real, portals through which heaven touched earth. Then he looked at me deeply and said, "The world will not be saved by large systems, but by awakened hearts." I cried, and for the first time I wished to return, not because here was better than there, but because I knew the mission was not yet over. I was there before him, feeling a peace that did not exist in this world. And yet there was a new weight growing inside me, a weight not from fear, but from responsibility, as if by seeing what I saw, I had been marked, as if I had been summoned for something much greater than myself. Jesus placed his hand on my chest, or perhaps on my essence, and said, "You weren't chosen because you're perfect. You were chosen because you remained available." Those words entered me like fire and balm at the same time. I understood that the mission he would entrust to me would not be easy. That perhaps I would be discredited, ridiculed, silenced. But I also understood that my silence from that moment on would be a form of betrayal, not to him, but to the truth now pulsating within me. "You will return, Rebecca," he said. My heart broke upon hearing that part. of me wanted to stay, wanted to be enfolded forever in that light and that peace, wanted to walk with him through that eternity without clocks. But another part, stronger, knew the world needed to hear, not in any way, not with fury, but with firmness, with love that doesn't negotiate principles. Then Jesus began to show me what I would find when I returned. I saw familiar people looking at me with doubt. Some would smile awkwardly, as if thinking, "Poor thing, lost her mind." Others would be afraid. Others still would try to convince me to forget, as if forgetting was possible after what I had seen. I also saw that many would not understand when I spoke about the feelings of white people, that they would accuse my vision of softening the oppressor. But Jesus showed me, "You will remind everyone that the enemy has no color, that guilt is a prison, and that true freedom only comes through sincere repentance followed by forgiveness." I cried, not from fear of being rejected, but because I saw how much people are hurt and how that pain is manipulated daily. I saw that my voice would be a cry in the midst of a storm, but someone would hear it. "It is not necessary to convince the entire world, Rebecca," he said. "Just light the next heart, which will light another, and thus the light will spread." At that moment, I felt everything around me start to vibrate in a different way. The celestial place still enveloped me, but something was changing. It was like an invisible countdown was reaching its end. The sensation was clear. I was about to return, and before the light began to fade around me, Jesus said one last thing. "When they doubt you, remember what you saw here. When you are tired, remember me." I could only whisper amen. That light that enveloped me, warm, alive, unconditional, began to vibrate differently, as if saying goodbye. Along with this change, my spirit began to be pulled. It wasn't a fall. It was more like passing through a veil, a heavy, almost solid veil. I looked at Jesus one last time before leaving. I wanted to ask if I would see him like this again, with such clarity. But before I said anything, he smiled tenderly and said, "Now is the time to trust." And then everything disappeared. Silence turned to noise. Lightness turned to weight. Peace turned to pain. It was like I had plunged into a body too tight, too fragile, too noisy. I felt the air violently enter my lungs, the heart racing, the eyes burned. There were shouts, machines beeping, people speaking loudly, and with it all came pain. A lot of pain. I awoke in a hospital bed. White lights. Above me, wires attached to my body. A crushing sensation in my chest. I heard my daughter crying beside the bed. My brother stood, holding her hand with red eyes. When they saw me open my eyes, they froze. "Mom?" My daughter said in a whisper, laden with 1,000 promises. I tried to smile, but my mouth didn't respond. I still couldn't speak. I just tried. Not for the physical pains, but for the immediate longing for the place I had come from, for the presence that now seemed so distant. The first hours were confusing. Examinations, doctors, questions. They told me I had been in a coma for 2 days. The car impact had caused a slight cranial trauma, some fractured ribs, and internal bleeding. The doctors said I was lucky to be alive. But I knew it wasn't luck. It was a mission. In the days following, as I was still recovering, I began to perceive the difference between me and the world around. People spoke to me as if nothing had happened, as if I had just had a scare. But inside me, everything was different. I looked at faces with new eyes, felt the hidden pains of each one, the silent guilt in the eyes of a white nurse who barely looked at me, the contained strength in the cleaning woman murmuring prayers while she cleaned the floor. I saw beyond, as if the veil between worlds was still half open. I wanted to tell someone what I had lived, but the first attempt was a shock. My sister, always devout, listened with a forced smile. When I mentioned Jesus, and what he told me about the future and spiritual divisions. She just murmured, "You must have dreamed all that. Rebecca, it was the trauma." That night, I cried alone. In the hospital room, not from frustration, but from compassion. I understood. They were still asleep. And that was what I needed to accept. Speaking the truth wouldn't always bring applause, but it would bring purpose. Days went by, and the hospital became a silent battlefield of internal struggle. My body healed, but my spirit burned. The memory of what I lived was so vivid that sometimes I'd close my eyes and feel the warmth of that light still in me. But here, everything was harsher, words colder, time rougher. I tried to share the experience with some close ones. I told my evangelical neighbor, thinking she might understand. She listened attentively until I mentioned Jesus, speaking about white people and the spiritual deception that made them carry guilt like a chain. She frowned, crossed her arms, and said, "Oh no, Rebecca, Jesus would never say something like that." That's talk of the enemy. That hurt more than I expected. I felt alone, as if I had returned to earth carrying a truth no one wanted to hear. But Jesus had prepared me for this. I remembered the last thing he said to me before I returned. "When they doubt you, remember what you saw here." And I remembered every detail, every sensation, every revelation. So I changed the strategy. Instead of trying to convince, I began to observe, to love, to serve as I always did. But now, with different awareness. I returned to the nursing home as soon as the doctor cleared me. They told me Donna Celia asked about me every day. When I entered her room, she smiled with her eyes closed and said, "You went there, didn't you?" I was in shock. "Where? Donna Celia?" She slowly opened her eyes, with that glow only those with one foot in the veil have, and replied, "That place where he lives. I dreamed of you there. You came back full of light." She believed. Even without explanation, she felt it. From there, things started to happen. A house staff member called me aside, eyes teary, and asked if she could share a strange dream she had, where she saw Jesus showing her invisible chains attached to people's backs. A rideshare driver I conversed with said out of nowhere, "I don't know what you have, ma'am, but I'm feeling peace in this car. May I ask for a prayer?" And so I started to understand. I didn't need to shout, just needed to be available. The light he placed in me didn't depend on a stage or a microphone. It was like living water flowing without me noticing. I began to write everything, every memory, every vision, every word, sometimes at night, sometimes at dawn, with tears in my eyes, not to convince but to record, like seeds cast to the wind. I knew they would someday fall on fertile soil. And one night, while gazing at the sky from my backyard, I felt that presence again, not with the eyes. Today marks 6 months since the accident. Much has changed on the outside, but within me, everything has been remade. I am no longer the Rebecca who believed I needed grand feats to be heard. I've discovered that the greatest revolution happens in the invisible, where the world's noise cannot reach. People still sometimes look at me with suspicion, others with curiosity. But there are those more than I imagined who listen with the heart, who don't ask for proof, but share tears, dreams, questions. It is for them that I speak, for them that I write, for them that I'll live. Returning was a renunciation, one of the greatest I have ever made. Leaving Jesus' presence, that light, that peace beyond words, was like tearing the soul from the lap of God. But I understood. True love is also sacrifice, and he loved me enough to let me choose, and I chose to warn that we are being manipulated by a force that doesn't just want our body, but our spirit, that racial, political, emotional division. It's all a carefully woven net to prevent us from remembering who we are. Jesus showed me there is something sacred in each people, that humanity's beauty is in diversity. But the enemy turned this diversity into trenches, planted shame in whites, pain in blacks, silence in indigenous peoples, because if all of us awaken together, the system would not survive. It is not about guilt. It is about healing. I saw that the future can still be redeemed, but the door is narrow. It cannot be crossed with pride nor fear, only with surrender, only with love. Today I wake up every day with a prayer on my lips, Lord. Use my life as a warning, as comfort, as a light arrow, and He has used it. I'm no longer worried about convincing anyone. I am merely a witness, and my mission is not to save the world, but to light hearts one at a time. If you are hearing this now, perhaps it is because you have also been called. Perhaps this seed is yours, and all you need to do is say yes, because the war has already begun. But victory, it is in every act of truth, and truth sounds like heaven, and truth sounds like heaven, and truth sounds like heaven.